Hello and good evening. My name is Carlos Dimbian, and I'm one of the newly appointed community patrons of the George House Trust. Can I please ask everyone to move forward to the stage? But I know most people are going to have umbrellas, but if you could stand to the side a little bit because we are live streaming this evening, that'd be much appreciated. And also, if I can ask you not to light your candles until we have the minute silence. Thank you. Thanks to the Proud Chorus for opening this evening's event. And I'm honoured to welcome you on behalf of the PASH partnership between BHA for Equality, George House Trust and the LGBT Foundation. 3 organisations that continue to stand firmly beside people living with and affected by HIV, driving education, tackling stigma and ensuring that no one ever faces HIV alone. Their collaboration embodies the very best of what Greater Manchester is known for: unity, strength, activism and love. Thanks for being here tonight as we gather in Sackville Gardens for this year's World AIDS Day Vigil. We come together as a community bound by compassion, remembrance, solidarity and hope. This space holds so much for our shared history, our collective grief, and our determination to keep moving forward together. This year World AIDS Day Vigil also marks the end of a programme of events for George House Trust's 40th anniversary. Their exhibition, Acting Up, 40 Years of HIV Activism in Greater Manchester, is still running at Manchester Central Library until the end of December. George House Trust are grateful for the National Lottery Heritage Fund for funding their 40th anniversary project, including the vigil tonight. And I also want to offer a heartfelt thank you to the National Lottery Heritage Fund for their generous support. Their commitment helps us preserve and share the stories, the heritage, and the lived experiences that must never ever be forgotten, ensuring future generations understand the journey that brought us here and the work that still lies ahead. I'd now like to invite Esther Campbell to come forward, please. Esther Campbell is a counsellor in private practice, as well as a qualified aromatherapist and yoga teacher. She was introduced to Nichiren Buddhism by her brother Ben, whose creativity and resilience inspired her. Through witnessing his transformation, Esther found her own sense of purpose in the practice. Esther, please.
Good evening. Today, as we remember all those whose lives have been affected by HIV and AIDS, I remember my brother Ben and would like to thank Joe Tanzer and the team at George House Trust for inviting me to this evening's vigil to share our story. I was born in February 1965, here in Manchester. If I had been born 2 weeks earlier, I'd have been born in London. But my father, who as well as being a very talented musician, was also a small-time gangster. He fled London in a hurry after being shot at. He took with him my brother Ben, aged 9, and my heavily pregnant mother. 2 months after my birth, my mother suffered a massive stroke from which she never recovered. Ben and I were left in a bedsit in Cheetham Hill with a violent alcoholic father who spent most of his time elsewhere. When I was 18 months old, our maternal grandmother came to visit us in Manchester from London. After seeing how we were living, she took us to Cheetham Hill Police Station, from where we were taken to live in a 50-bed institution run by the Salvation Army in Southport. The Hill Children's Home was a really tough place. Abuse of all kinds was rife. And for the next 8 years, despite the many personal issues he was dealing with, Ben became my protector. Ben left when I was 8 years old to go to drama school in London. But he would visit me 2 or 3 times a year, whenever he could. Despite this, I felt lost without him. And over the next few years, I retreated into myself and became a deeply depressed young woman. At the age of 14, unable to bear the thought that I would have to stay in the children's home until I was 18, I started running away on a regular basis, hitchhiking to London. I started drinking and putting myself at terrible risk. And true to form, Ben did whatever he could to help me. He even took on a 2-year battle with social services to get me fostered by a friend of his back here in Manchester. He eventually won that battle, and I came back to Manchester a few weeks before my 16th birthday. After I left the children's home, I dropped out of school, continued to drink, started smoking weed, and stumbled from one crisis to another, from one abusive relationship to the next, and I continued to lean very heavily on Ben. It's hardly surprising that by the age of 18, Ben was an alcoholic and repeating some of the patterns of our father. Despite this, he worked hard, graduated from drama school, and embarked on a successful career. Some of you may have come to the showing of the film Looking for Langton, part of George House Trust's 40th celebrations the other week, in which he had a lead role. In 1982, whilst working on a BBC TV children's series, he was introduced to Nichiren Buddhism by a co-star, and he started to regularly chant the mantra, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Over the next 10 years, I watched my brother transform many aspects of his life, including winning his sometimes a very public and painful battle with alcohol. In 1992, after the funeral of Ben's ex-lover, who had died from an AIDS-related illness, I asked him if he had been tested. He said that he had been tested soon after starting to practice Buddhism, and he had tested positive. At this point, he had been living with HIV for at least 10 years. He hadn't told me about it, he said, because he didn't want to give it any power in his life. He had no intention of dying from it, and he said, please don't mention it again. I found this very difficult. Affected by all the propaganda and misleading information around the so-called AIDS epidemic, I was consumed with fear. He was going to die a horrible, painful death, probably alone. I needed to understand what was happening to him, what his experience was going to be, and how I could help him. This is when I found George House Trust and became a volunteer befriender. Over the next 12 years, Ben continued to live a full and active life. He remained in apparent good health and looked after himself incredibly well. He not only managed to stop drinking, he quit smoking and committed to a clean, whole food diet and a regular yoga and Tai Chi practice. He became quite fit and healthy and even said that HIV had saved his life. Insisting on a holistic approach to his health, Ben had a homeopath, Chinese herbalist, and naturopath, all who were involved and consulted with his NHS medics. This was very pioneering at the time. His approach and outlook was so positive, and he accredited this to his Buddhist practice. Over the years, Ben took every opportunity possible to talk to me about Buddhism and encourage me to give chanting a go. But although Buddhist philosophy made a lot of sense to me, I couldn't see how chanting that strange phrase, Nam Myoho Renge Kyo, was going to make the slightest difference to my life. And so I ignored, or at least humoured him. Or at best, rather, humoured him. In 1991, I was hospitalised by a man who I had previously had a relationship with and who had continued to stalk me for 4 years. At the beginning of this ordeal with this man, Ben had continued to support me in his usual way, reassuringly supportive, praising my life, and attempting to make me feel good about myself. On hearing at 8 o'clock in the evening that I was in hospital, Ben travelled from London to Manchester on the overnight train and was at my side by 6 the next morning. However, this time he was angry, He said that he couldn't go on rescuing me in the way that I seemed to expect. He told me that it was time for me to start taking responsibility for my life. He left me with fruit, water, vitamins, supplements, and a few copies of a Buddhist monthly publication. I was at rock bottom, feeling sore and more than a bit sorry for myself. However, in one of those magazines, I read something that led me to want to give it a go, and I chanted Nam-myoho Renge Kyo from my hospital bed, and I have continued to practice Buddhism to this day. In the autumn of 2003, Ben started to pull away from me. He asked me to stop calling him because he found my frequent telephone calls invasive, and he felt smothered by my concern. I found it very difficult not to be in touch with him, and so I used my Buddhist practice to connect with his life, and I developed a strong desire to understand more about his experience. And I found myself writing to social services to request my care records. It took a while, over 6 months, but at the end of April 2004, I learnt many truths that Ben had protected me from. The first thing I read was that my mother's stroke had been the result of a blow to the head from my father. He wasn't arrested, and we were left in his care because she didn't die. And in 1965, it wasn't an offence to beat your wife. I went on to read how Ben had been my main carer for the first year of my life, how he would get up in the morning to feed and change me before school, then rush home at lunchtime to feed and change me again, before returning to school for the afternoon. He took care of all my needs. He had all this responsibility at 9 years old. Although he tried to shield me from the truth of his experience at the time, I learnt how he had endured regular beatings from our father. I read that when we first went into the children's home, I would not let anybody but Ben near me. Our attachment to each other raised concerns amongst some social workers who felt it was wrong and a bit strange for a boy of his age to be so attentive to a little girl of my age. They tried and they failed in their attempts to separate us. After spending over 12 hours reading, I was overcome with a deep sense of gratitude, and I decided to chant a large amount over 3 days to express my appreciation for him. As I chanted, I imagined each Nam-myoho Renge Kyo had an arrow attached, piercing the universe and fusing with Ben's life. I wanted him to feel it. On the 3rd day of my chanting, Ben phoned me very early in the morning. He apologized and asked forgiveness for pushing me away. I told him there was nothing to forgive and that I owed him my life. I told him how fortunate I was to have born together with him in this lifetime, and I thanked him for being such a fantastic brother. Ben died suddenly later that day. It's 21 years now since Ben passed away, but is with me every day. Today, I work as a counsellor in private practice. I am also a yoga teacher. However, after 34 years of Buddhist practice, a large amount of my time is dedicated to serving as a faith and pastoral leader in the Greater Manchester area. I live with pretty constant and sometimes debilitating pain. I have fibromyalgia and other chronic illnesses. Ben's positive example of taking personal responsibility for his health has greatly influenced my approach to wellness, and I also remain positive and hopeful with a sense of gratitude for who I am and the woman I have become. I can't imagine who or where I would be without my brother Ben, without Ben's unconditional love and support. Things could have been a whole lot different if I hadn't had the good fortune to have born with him as my big brother. His shining example of overcoming adversity and becoming an incredibly awesome human being changed the trajectory of my life for good. Thank you.
Thank you, Esther. Very deep and meaningful. It now gives me great pleasure in introducing Paul Fairweather. Paul was one of 6 gay men who founded Manchester AIDS Line in 1985, the telephone helpline that later developed into what is now the George House Trust. Paul.
In 1985, when we were setting up Manchester AIDS Line, there was a huge amount of fear, paranoia, and ignorance around HIV. Initially, no one knew how it was transmitted, and there were no treatments. 40 years later, the situation has changed enormously. I was diagnosed in 2000 and have been living extremely well with HIV for over 25 years. But in those early days, I took loads of tablets, and now I take 1 tablet a day, see my consultant every 6 months, and my health is completely fine. However, HIV stigma and self-stigma is still alive and well and needs to be challenged. The Positive Speakers Project I managed for the last 10 years has played a key role in challenging that. We've talked to thousands of young people in Manchester schools, talked to doctors, nurses, healthcare workers, voluntary groups, LGBT groups. However, we need to be ever vigilant. We need to learn from our history. For today, in this country and across the world, we're facing unprecedented attacks on the LGBT community, especially the trans community, on refugees and asylum seekers, and on people living with HIV. We need to challenge the hatred, the lies, and the nonsense we hear all about us. For today, in this country and across the world, governments are cutting their global aid funds, which keep millions of people living with HIV alive. But we need to be ever hopeful. We need to remember that our passion, our rage, our determination is way more powerful. In 1985, we faced real threats, and we acted in a tiny, grotty room just round the corner from here. On a Monday evening, we talked to people who were terrified of contracting HIV. We talked to people newly diagnosed with HIV, supported them, their family, and their friends and lovers. This monologue I'm about to read tells the story of some of the calls we took on Manchester AIDS Line. It was written with a huge amount of support from the amazing Nathaniel Hall and Dibby Theatre, and it was first performed at the Lowry by the Sunday Boys as part of their HIV concert. We're still here. And indeed, we are. Manchester AIDS Line, how can I help you? I think I might have AIDS. I don't know what to do. Help me. I'm so scared. I wonder, can you sense the fear in me, hidden so deep, maybe no one can see my confusion, chaos, and conspiracy? I wonder, can you sense the sadness, expectant of death, but no time to mourn, keep busy and positive, can't be hopeless, forlorn? I wonder, can you sense the energy, youthful we are, hopeful, ever hopeful, yet so unaware? Manchester AIDS Line, how can I help you? I had sex on a toilet seat. Will I die? I've been bitten by a mosquito. Am I at risk? I had sex with a homosexual in 1952. Am I doomed? I kissed another boy at school. I'm so scared. I've been to a safari park. Is it going to get me? So many worried well. Listen as I tell them, you will survive, you will thrive, you won't die, unlike my friends. Manchester AIDS Line, how can I help you? Liquid hatred flows from the phone. Faggot, queer, crawl out of your cesspit, you all deserve to die. I scorn their hate, translate it into words from a bygone age. Musical, sybarite, friend of Dorothy, green carnation wearer. Manchester AIDS Line, how can I help you? Fear, rage, hopelessness flows from the phone. My son is dying. He has AIDS. Your heart will be broken. His heart will fail. Your hope is ending. His life is ending. He tells me more about his son, his hopes, his dreams, his fears. Suddenly, I realize I know him biblically, socially, politically. Abstract becomes concrete. Empathy becomes fear. Sympathy becomes pain. Silence equals death, and we will not be silent anymore. Now silence equals death, and I will not be silent anymore. We are broken, hearted, scarred and scared. We rage against the dying. Manchester AIDS line, how can I help you? Terror flows from the phone. It's me, Roger. I'm positive at Monsell. They won't let me go. Wild party holder, disease incubator, unsafe and unclean. Detained at Monsell Hospital, denied your basic human rights, desperate for solace, delivered by lobbies and knights in shining armour. You never recovered. You never regained your sense of self. Your anger ate away at you. You raged. We raged with you. For the ignorance is escalating. Fear and paranoia swirl all around. We were dangerous. Now we are deadly. We were sick. Now we are the sickness. Don't you dare go to the light. We are righteous. We are fearless. We are defiant. We are magnificent. Manchester AIDS line, how can I help you?
Thanks, Paul, and thanks for everything you've done over the last 40 years. It's very much greatly appreciated. Manchester's Beacon of Hope was erected in the year 2000. So this year, it's the 25th anniversary and stands as a memorial to everyone lost to HIV and as a symbol of solidarity with everyone living with HIV today. Tonight, as the candles are lit and the garden fills with quiet reflection, let us remember that every light we hold represents a life, a story, and a future worth fighting for. Let us carry that light beyond this vigil, into conversations, our workplaces, our communities, so understanding replaces ignorance and compassion replaces stigma. Please join me now to light your candles as you observe a minute's silence. Thank you. Could I now ask Dr. Michelle Croston to come forward, please? Dr. Michelle Croston has worked in HIV care for over 25 years at both national and international levels. Her specialist focus is mental health and psychological well-being, particularly sleep. She's a clinical fellow of the European Society of Person-Centred Healthcare, host of HIV Matters podcast, and a trustee of Minnie's Village, supporting people living with HIV and Hep B in Sierra Leone. Michelle.
Thank you. So good evening, and thank you for allowing me to share a few words on such an important day of remembrance. I see Manchester Weather's joined us this evening. I'm speaking tonight from the perspective of somebody who has walked alongside people living with HIV for nearly 3 decades. It was a huge privilege to be asked to take part of George House Trust's 40th anniversary oral history project. My journey began as a young nurse in Manchester at a time when HIV care was about palliation and helping people to die with dignity. I remember the faces, the stories, and the silence that surrounded HIV then. We saw so much loss, and yet even in the darkest days, there was resilience, love, and a sense of community. My first encounter with HIV was a young support worker at Manchester Royal Infirmary in the late 90s. Back then, HIV was still surrounded by fear and stigma. I vividly remember meeting a young man who was street homeless and self-harming. When I learned that he might have AIDS, I was terrified, not because of him, but because of my own ignorance. I spent hours in the library trying to understand HIV, and that moment sparked a lifelong commitment to learn and advocate for better care. I then went on to work in infectious diseases at North Manchester, a time when HIV care was about supporting people to die well. We saw so much loss, but yet so much hope. I witnessed what we called the Lazarus effect, people who were close to death dancing down the wards months later. It was definitely life-changing. I remember sitting with people so they didn't eat alone, sneaking them back onto the wards after just one last party. I also remember dancing after shifts because grief was too heavy and attending too many funerals that felt endless. Those memories will never leave me and have helped shape the nurse I am. I think of the young men and women I cared for, many of whom have been rejected by families but found family in us, the nurses, the doctors and charities who stood by them. Tonight we also mark 40 years of George House Trust, an organisation that stood as a beacon of hope in the early days. When families turned away, George House Trust stepped in. When stigma silenced voices, George House Trust amplified them. For 4 decades, they have been there providing care, advocating, and for a sense of belonging. Their work reminds us that HIV is not just a medical condition, it's also a human story, and every person deserves dignity and support. Over the years, as a nurse, I would have been lost in the wilderness without their support. We've come a long way since those early days, and I'm honoured to work alongside passionate doctors, nurses, psychologists, and support staff at the Northern. We are now in a privileged position where healthcare has seen treatment advances, and we can now say you equals you, which is a message of liberation and something I never tired of saying. But while science has advanced, stigma still lingers. People are still diagnosed late, especially women. Women's voices are still too quiet, an area where George House Trusts have stepped up and championed supporting women. Globally, many people struggle to access basic care. Ageing with HIV brings new complexities like menopause and comorbidities. We also have these ambitious targets to end transmission by 2030. I believe that this requires more than medicine. It needs visibility, education and tackling stigma head-on, something that George House Trust is leading on. I do hope that the next generation of healthcare providers see HIV as a manageable condition, free from stigma, shame and care that evolves into something simple. It's been a huge privilege to walk alongside so many people and to be part of George House Trustees' Oral History Project. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Michelle. I'd now like to ask Gabriel Clark to come forward. Gabriel is a queer British Sardinian actor and writer, perhaps best known for his role as Ollie Morgan on Channel 4's Hollyoaks. He has an UFI award, I think I said that right, probably I'll get corrected in a moment. Writer, director and artist director of Switch Manchester Theatre Company. His upcoming work includes Tiptoe and the stage production The Night Larry Kramer Kissed Me. Gabriel.
Hello. Can we just take a moment to say a massive thank you and give another round of applause to all of our fantastic healthcare workers and the fantastic Michelle Croston. I also just want to take a moment to thank the PASH partners and everyone here for creating such a safe, warm, albeit rainy space for us to share and remember together. It goes without saying that gatherings like this right now are a lifeline. And right now does feel quite dark, but there is light. Us, stood here in the rain together, sharing stories. Because storytelling is one of our most powerful tools. There's a reason that authoritarians, dictators, and bigots ban books. Words are weapons. And the right artist has the ability to find the right words that can wake people up to injustice, rally people to stand together, to act up, to fight back. Art can inspire activism. That is its power. And one such story that inspired me, that became a rallying cry for change when it was first performed, was Larry Kramer's play about the early days of the AIDS crisis, The Normal Heart. That play inspired me into activism, into making my work political. Kramer's play also inspired many people, including the writer David Drake. David Drake was also motivated into activism and wrote the play The Night Larry Kramer Kissed Me. Now, that play was last seen in Manchester 30 years ago, but the themes of pain, rage, and injustice still echo loudly today. Now, just as tonight, we're looking back at 40 years of the George House Trust. Next year, we'll be looking back at The Night Larry Kramer Kissed Me and bringing it back to Manchester, raising funds for the George House Trust's incredible work. I'd love to take a moment to share an extract of this play with you all now. In this moment, a young man finds himself at his first vigil during the height of the HIV/AIDS epidemic. I've got this. I've got this light. I've got this one point of light to steer me, guide me through the night toward 1,000 points of light that now surround me, engulf me here on the street. We vigil. We meet in the night, with the night. As the night that hovers with those who went, and they carry us, are dead. And so be careful when you blink or think, that's it. No more, I can't absorb another memory because someone else is missing. I know where you went. We're all here in the night. Even you, little one, off to the right. Have I seen you? Have we ever met? I know you. You never famous, never counted, never quoted, never seen. Nobody. Somebody's best little boy in the world. Who came here to this city from some small town searching for somewhere. Searching for yourself. Maybe for me. Maybe I never heard you singing softly to your records, but my ear still listens. Maybe I never plucked you from the front lines and we never got arrested together, but I'm still fighting. And maybe we never took each other to bed, brother to brother, but my eyes are still triggered to my heart and to my flesh to lend warmth to the brothers left here, left queer, left together in the night. And so I know you. I honor you. I love you. I light this light for you. For somewhere, in a moment of stillness, in a moment of semblance, in a moment, we'll meet. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that moment with me. Thank you to David Drake for his words. And thank you to Larry Kramer and every activist that we lost, every artist we lost that continues to inspire us today. I'd now like to invite another incredibly inspiring activist to the stage to share more stories. Please give Ellie Harrison a big, warm welcome. Thank you.
I'm not gonna lie, I had visions of me slipping then. Before I start, basically, my parents have decided to watch the live stream and they've asked me really kindly if I'd say hello, Tara and Simon. So, hi, Tara and Simon. So, I guess we all start with everyone is doing tonight with a big thank you to everyone that's braved the weather, or like my friend Lewis, if you were bribed here with a promise of pints after. For those of you who don't remember me from the Pride Vigil, I'm so sorry I've got to make you sign this. My name's Ellie Harrison, I've got a great pair of tits, and I'm living with HIV. I'm so sorry. So, World AIDS Day is a moment to pause, to reflect, and to honour those that we've lost. For many of us, our story with HIV has often felt incredibly heavy. But the truth is, today, in 2025, we stand in a place that people before us could scarcely imagine. We have treatment that allows people with living HIV to not just live full, healthy lives, but vibrant and happy ones. We have U equals U, 1 pill a day, and a message that seemed impossible, but is now so beautifully, scientifically, indisputably true. We have PrEP and public health guidance that continues to improve. And we have a real, serious national goal of ending new transmissions of HIV in the UK by 2030. That's not just hopeful, it's historic and monumental. For those who aren't aware, we had some sad news globally last week when the US government decided that they would not commemorate World AIDS Day, which I'm sure all of us here today see as an incredible, heartbreaking piece of news. However, very excitingly, the UK have done quite the opposite. And today we announced a new HIV action plan. And this is actually my 8th talk of the day, talking about it. So it's a plan that is honestly quite trailblazing. And for those of you that haven't heard it already, the UK are going to invest £170 million into funding life-saving HIV care, putting at-home HIV test available to trial to order on the NHS app, increasing accessibility to everyone. They will continue to fund opt-out testing in A&Es, and it's so important, whilst we fight together to end the transmissions of HIV, we also remember that we have to band together to fight the stigma. It's still present in most of people's lives living with HIV today. So tonight, let's stand firmly together, collectively, and say enough is enough. Enough shame, enough misinformation, enough barriers that keep people silent. What we really need is openness and compassion. Ending new transmissions of the UK means ending stigma just as much as scaling prevention and treatment. We need to encourage all of our peers to get tested and remove not only the fear of testing, but the misunderstanding that HIV can happen to anyone. Recently, I had the privilege of working with One as part of the campaign to support the Global Fund. For those of you who aren't aware of the Global Fund, it's basically like the superhero coalition for HIV care. So if the Avengers were doing HIV across the globe, that's the Global Fund. So they fight against HIV, TB, and malaria. Being part of this campaign reminded me that the fight against HIV is not just happening in Manchester. It's happening in all communities across the world. Communities where treatment actually means life or death. Funding decisions that we make in warm offices, maybe not warm tonight, but normally warm offices, thousands of miles away, can actually change people's futures. It's a harrowing statistic to know that 630,000 people died last year of a HIV-related illness. So tonight, as we've all held our candles, let's honour the past, but commit to the future with the same energy, the same stubbornness, and the same refusal to give up that has always defined this community. We can end transmissions of HIV by 2030. We can end the stigma, albeit that might be a slightly harder battle. And we can make sure that solidarity doesn't stop at national borders. A huge part of World AIDS Day will always be remembrance. But if you take anything away from my talk tonight, it's that I would like World AIDS Day to now be about hope. On August the 20th, 2018, I was diagnosed with HIV. On that day, I remember I hoped for a day that I could be happy again. That day actually came quite quickly. So when I got there, I hoped for a day that I'd be strong enough to share my story. And for the first time in 2021, on World AIDS Day, I did just that. And then I made a big hope that I wanted to meet people living with HIV. And of all the people I could meet first, I met Paul Fairweather. So my biggest hope for this evening is that as a community, we can give people living with HIV their dignity back, and hopefully target a world where the virus can be fully eradicated. So in the words of my favourite HIV charity, I hope for a world where HIV holds no one back. I just want to thank everyone at the George House Trust who have always been a massive part of my journey and have been like a family to me. And to every person that has joined us here tonight, your presence is so incredibly powerful, especially in the pouring down rain. And together we're going to build a future where World AIDS Day will not just mark remembrance, but one day a final victory. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Ellie. Some powerful words there. So again, if we can thank all our speakers this evening, a big round of applause to them all. Thanks to the Proud Chorus. Thanks to David from Frog Flowers for donating the beautiful wreath that you can see. Thanks to Pam Jones for carrying out the live BSL interpreting. And thank you. Thank you each and every one of you for coming here tonight, standing in the pouring rain, standing together, reaffirming our promise to keep fighting stigma, to keep advocating for better health equality, inspiring people living with HIV to live healthy and confident lives. Please join us in the village for a drink later after listening one more time to the fabulous Proud Chorus as they sing us out this evening. Thank you and good night.
Undefined. Reaching for something